everybody, let's talk about naming ionic compounds. Okay, the first thing is you can't name an ionic compound if it's not an ionic compound. So I need you to be able to recognize when you have an ionic compound. An ionic compound is made of a metal and a nonmetal because we have to have a cation and an anion. Or you can have a polyatomic ion present because that takes care of that whole charged particle thing. So you have to have a metal and a nonmetal. So I'm going to write 3 formulas down below, and the first thing I need you to think about is this an ionic compound? Okay, MgCl2. Magnesium's a metal, chlorine's a nonmetal. Yes, this guy is an ionic compound. N2O4? Oh, both nitrogen and oxygen are on the right corner of that periodic table. Nope, not an ionic compound. FeSO4. Fe's in the middle, but it's a transition metal. So I have a transition metal and a nonmetal polyatomic ion. So double the fun. Yes, I have ionic compounds. Once you can identify that you have an ionic compound, then you can name it. And actually, they're pretty straightforward for their naming. What you're going to do is you're going to take your metal, and that one you're just going to call the element by its name. The nonmetal, you're going to take your element stem, and we'll talk about what I mean by that in just a second. And then you're going to add the ending IDE. So MgCl2 becomes magnesium, and then chlorine becomes chloride. So chlor is my stem of my ionic compound, and then ide is the ending. I'm going to do FeSO4 here in just a minute, but let's just look at one more that I don't have up here right now. And so let's take a look at ALN. That would work for me. Okay, so for this one, Al, that's aluminum. So I've got aluminum. And then I have nitrogen. And so this guy becomes nitride. And so I get aluminum nitride. So the base name is just the first element, second element, toss in the IDE. And by convention, we do always put the metal or the cation first, and then the anion second. So we'll always kind of name it in that order. What if you have a polyatomic ion present? Oh, that's easy. Just use its name. So for example, if I have something like calcium and the polyatomic ion nitrate, this is just calcium nitrate. On the other hand, if I had ammonium and sulfur, this is ammonium sulfide. So if you have a polyatomic ion, you just use its name in place of whatever part of the name would not be there. Please note, and please remember, when we're naming things, you do not include the subscripts for ionic compounds. You can figure those out based on what the elements are. Okay, here's the only thing that tends to trip people up, and that's what if we have a transition metal letter 10? I told you we don't include subscripts because we can find the charges for our elements. But what about transition metals where there are multiple charges present? Remember those Roman numerals? This is where we use them. If I have something with a transition metal, lead or tin, I am going to use Roman numerals. And those Roman numerals will show me or tell me the charge on the metal. So for example, if I had something like FeCl3, okay, this, we know each chlorine has a charge of -1, and I've got 3 of them. So let's draw this out here real quick. So I've got 3 chlorines, each with a charge of -1, and I've got 1 iron. Well, I know the charges have to be equal, so that means my charge is +3. So when I go to tell someone what my name for this compound is, this is going to be iron, Roman numeral 3, chloride. So all I've done is I've included the charge as a Roman numeral after the metal name. Let's do one more with these transition metals because they're the ones, again, that tend to trip people up. So let's squeeze it down here over on the right. And let's take CuNO3. Okay, Oftentimes when people get started, it helps them to kind of draw a particle visualization or a half particle visualization. If you don't feel like dealing with the bubbles, I'm not going to be upset. I've got 1 copper and 1 nitrate. My nitrate has a -1 charge. There's only 1 copper to balance that out, so this has to be a +1, which means that the name then is going to be copper 1, because that's telling me the charge, nitrate. That's it. Those are all the pieces. Okay, so I made you a nice little flowchart to help you keep this in your head. First thing you're going to have to ask yourself is, what type of elements do you have? If it's a metal and a nonmetal, or there's a polyatomic ion present, that's going to be an ionic compound. And so that's what we're talking about naming today. We'll talk about what to do if there's no metals soon, very soon. But once you know you have an ionic compound, you need to ask yourself, is there a transition metal, letter 10, an element that can have multiple charges? And those are the most common ones. The answer is no. Sweet. Just element, IDE. If the answer is yes, make sure you include the Roman numerals so someone can figure out what the charge is for your compound. And then as a caveat or last little piece, remember, if you have a polyatomic ion, you just plug its name in, which means you have to know your polyatomic ions. So if you haven't memorized those yet, get on that for me.